In collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
This week, we'll hear about an online diagnostic tool that could help you decide whether you need to call your doctor about COVID-19. And we'll discuss the House of Parliament, which is debating whether or not to allow kosher and halal slaughter of sheep and goats in Cyprus for export. The University of Nicosia's Medical School has come up with an online diagnostic tool that means everybody who thinks they might have coronavirus symptoms can go in and check online whether or not they ought to go and see their GP or report to the relevant health ministry phone number. Joining us to explain how it works is the chief of the University of Nicosia's Primary Care Centre, and he is Anastasis Sioftanos. Will you start by explaining why you think this is necessary? I've had a look at it. It's pretty simple, actually, isn't it? You just have to fill out a few questions.
Yeah, the main aim of this was to keep it simple, basically, because it's for the public to use, first of all. Now, the reason why we wanted to do this tool was because we realized that with the COVID-19 pandemic and the pressure it imposed on the dedicated lines that the Ministry of Health has, they developed like the 1420 line. People used to call and they wouldn't get through, or they didn't know where to get information from. So basically, since the Ministry of Health and the ESC, they sent to the personal doctors, or GPs, as the personal doctors they call them here, they sent us instructions on how to deal with suspected cases of COVID-19. We said, as a primary care center, being like a GP surgery, that it would be good to help the people and have the instructions in a simple computerized format, like in the form of a flowchart, but in the form of asking you questions, simple questions, and then giving you some advice so that people don't panic unnecessarily, basically, especially if they cannot get through to anyone.
And there was a problem, certainly in the early days, I think, with the numbers that people were trying to call and saying, I think I might have it, but I can't get through and talk to anybody to tell me whether I need to go to hospital. So that's going to make life a lot easier. But I'm interested in the whole idea of telemedicine, because particularly in Scandinavia, it is big. You don't need to go to your doctor's surgery. You can even do video conferencing like we're doing and have remote diagnostics, even face-to-face with your doctor. So do you think that this might be something that after the coronavirus crisis is over, we've started with the smaller diagnostic tools, we might end up expanding it so that you don't have to go and wait at a doctor's surgery? Because tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that even once the pandemic passes, people are still going to have to social distance, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, the direction of now primary care and medicine in general, I mean, especially in primary care, is to use more telemedicine, as you are saying, because, I mean, it started already even before the COVID pandemic in London, at least, where I was a managing partner there in surgery. I mean, there were companies like Babylon that they started like using Skype and even the incentive from the government was to use more telemedicine, like Skype. Also, we're using, like, for example, with dermatology cases, they didn't need to come in, they sent us a picture, and then we directed the picture to the dermatologist himself, had a look, and then gave them advice. I mean, so there are a lot of things that you can do. Like, I was looking from Israel, for example, because they're quite big in Israel about this, especially with computerized systems. Like, they wanted to employ it in our practice in London, for example. We used to use the software where it asks you your symptoms, and it came up with a potential differential diagnosis before they actually saw the GP. So, and we used to use it at reception. So it's a big thing. Now with COVID, there are companies like the Sheba university hospital in Israel, from January, I think they were using telemetry. So basically, in order for them to, like mild cases of COVID that are at home, and they need monitoring, obviously, like we call them now, they tell us their temperature. However, it's quite important to check their oxygen saturation, for example. And this hospital, they say they're using telemetry, so they monitor at any point of the day their temperature, their respiratory rate, their oxygen saturation, and then they give them advice. And that's the direction, I think, with telemedicine is going to be bigger in the future. I'm pretty sure, especially now with the social distancing, it will be even more important. And something else I wanted to add to this is also that people's habits will be different as well. So, for example, in Cyprus, as opposed to the UK, people, when they have a bit of a cough, a bit of like flu-like symptoms, like a bit of a runny nose, they go straight to the doctor. Now, with all this that happened, I'm pretty sure people will realize that going to the doctor just for a runny nose from the beginning is not in their benefit.
We should perhaps say, should we not, that the other thing is getting the Cypriot public used to the idea of general practitioners or family doctors, because it's not something that we really had as a general way. People used to, before RSI, just say, I've got a stomachache, I'll go to a gastroenterologist. They went straight to the top people, whereas now there's a history of family medicine, or it will build up over the years. So I guess that we've got to get that into the general way people think of their health.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. To be honest with you, I'm new here. I've been here for the last 3-4 months. I've been working in the UK for more than 10 years as a general practitioner. So obviously it has been much different how the culture works. I mean, I have patients calling, my eye hurts, I want to refer to the ophthalmologist. I have stomach pain, I want to refer to the gastroenterologist. I don't think people yet realize that 90-95% of their problems can be dealt with very quickly and very easily by their GP. And hopefully with time and with trust of their doctor, then this will build up, hopefully.
So let's finish off, if we may, going back to this diagnostic tool. Where can people find it? And what are the questions that you ask them so that we can guide them through what they need to do?
So basically, the tool is at the moment is on the website of the university, and it's on www.unic.ac.cy/coronavirus. And on there is the diagnostic tool, but also there are other very, very important information, like, for example, lifestyle medicine.
We did a whole program with your lifestyle medicine expert a couple of weeks ago. But when you go into that diagnostic tool, I mean, I looked at it and I think the first question is, do you have a temperature or something like that?
So the diagnostic tool, as soon as you get started, first of all, it will go through a few questions to make sure that it's not an emergency, okay? Because the first thing that it will do is make sure that it's not an emergency, because we don't want someone who is having a stroke, for example, going to check their symptoms and then waiting there. So we want to make sure it's like the 111 website in the UK. It's similar to that. It asks you first, make sure it's not an emergency. Then you have two choices. One choice is to check your symptoms or lack of symptoms. It doesn't matter if you don't have any symptoms. You can still use it. The next tab or link is for people who actually have COVID and they're in self-isolation at home with no symptoms or mild symptoms. So there are two links. So if we take each link separately, so link one, which is for the symptoms checker or the absence of symptom checker, I'll tell you why I'm saying that. It will ask you, the first 4 questions will be basically the 4 main symptoms based on studies and based on the guidelines that you've given us, which are if you have fever more than 37.3, if you have myalgia, pain in your muscles, or if you have extreme unusual fatigue, not just I feel a bit tired today, and also a dry, persistent cough. So those are the four main diagnostic criteria to diagnose COVID. Now, it's a bit difficult, I have to admit, because these are the guidelines. However, we know that there are other symptoms to COVID. For example, loss of smell, diarrhea, runny nose, sore throat, which is in less percentage, but we cannot ask, the guidelines are for those four main symptoms, which are in more than half of the cases, really. Whereas the other ones maybe in 10%, maybe in 20%, maybe in 30%. So that's why they put those four main symptoms. Now, we have to be careful, though, because if we have any of the other symptoms, it doesn't necessarily mean you don't have COVID. So that's why in the advice after they give. So if we go back a step, once it asks you those four questions, then it will ask you, have you had a contact with a confirmed case or suspected case of COVID? Have you traveled abroad in the last 14 days, which is a bit difficult now with...
Well, there have been no flights, so most people haven't unless they've just arrived and they've done the quarantine. Okay, so it is a simple diagnostic tool, and assuming that somebody comes out at the end of it and it seems that they probably do have COVID-19, what advice are they given? Should they then call the government number or call their doctor?
Basically, the guidelines are, if they may have COVID-19, they have to call their personal doctor. If they're in the vulnerable group, or depending on what symptoms they have, they may refer them to these new public health check clinics dedicated for COVID, whereby they have the protective gear. You go there, they assess you, and then they do the COVID testing. And the way that it's done, it's again online. There is a platform that the ASC made, and we refer people online, and then they give them a call back the same day, usually. And then they go and they have a check. It's
not clear to me how long it takes for the results of a COVID test to come through.
From the experience we've had up to now, 24 to 48 hours after they have a test, they get their results back.
They would presumably go home, self-isolate until they get the phone call that says all clear or whatever they need to do next. We've been talking to Anastasis Shoftanos, who is the head of the Primary Care Centre at the University of Nicosia Medical School. Thank you. A vote was held earlier this week in Parliament about the slaughter of animals. Sheep and goat farmers demanded that the government change the existing law to allow them to slaughter those animals according to kosher and halal regulations. Now that means, as I'm sure most of you know, that an animal is standing in a pen and its throat is cut and it is then allowed to bleed to death. It's a long, slow death, and it's something that has not been allowed in the Republic of Cyprus for many years. Joining us from the Animal Party of Cyprus is Kyriakos Kyriakou, because Parliament met, as I said earlier this week, to vote on this, and in the end they postponed the vote. So it's not yet changed the law. But Kyriakos, the Agriculture Minister had actually, as I believe, proposed that the law should be changed, and let me clarify this, temporarily, and I'm not absolutely sure why. The farmers were saying that they were suffering losses from not selling the meat, but if you look around the supermarkets of Cyprus with Easter coming up, all the Cypriots are still buying their sheep meat, their goat meat, and all the other meats. So can you just bring us up to date? Is this something that's been a long-standing demand of those farmers, or is it something just now and they're using the fact that possibly meat sales have gone down, although recently the Butchers Association said meat sales were just fine? What's going on here?
Well, exactly. The question is, what is going on? because, as you know, I am in this animal welfare for 30 years. And I have notes for many years concerning whatever issues they are. And in 1989, we were the first in Cyprus to bring in the humane education. And at the time it was something which was called humane slaughter, which then we realized after 5 years with the compassion of goat farming, there is not such thing, humane slaughter. So what's happening today by those which I hear you saying, the farmers, do you know that it's not the farmers which are causing all these troubles, but the unions? And suddenly they were asking that it's very urgent because many animals were not find their way to the local market.
I have to interrupt there. What have the unions got to do with it if the farmers are happy? Because if sales are carrying on pretty much as normal, the stories we read in the press were that the farmers were concerned because since they weren't selling enough meat, they needed to export it, and they wanted this brought in specifically so that they could export the sheep and the goats killed in this manner to Israel. Bring that into the picture.
Okay. Let's put it in simple terms and to tell the truth, because usually the political parties, they play games and they don't tell the truth. Now, who put up the farmers? Who are those farmers which they said they have a lot of animals? If you ask me, there are maybe 2 or 3, okay? And now they are using the case, you are using the situation, and they are coming, those businessmen, Mr. Costantino, which is the same guy who tried in the past to bring crocodiles from Israel in order to start a park with crocodiles, and it failed. Now, this businessman is the same one who last week, he opened his mouth and he said that he found a market, he found business in Israel, which they can export this meat. That means the proposal of the government, which is supposed to be an urgent matter because of the coronavirus, they were telling us that, and they put a deadline on the 31st of December 2020, that is a temporary situation in order to help the farmers and the animals to be slaughtered in Cyprus and export the meat in Israel. Because of the pressure now, slowly, the truth is there. There is no such market. Who is going to buy that? What are the rabbis in Cyprus saying about this? Because as you know, according to the regulation, the EU regulation, which is specific, says that not any slaughter without pre-stunning or pre-anesthesia. He gives some relaxations only to satisfy the religious groups in the member states. And I will give you an example. Last year, Holland, he passed a law, and the law says that not allowed to export any meat, either halal or with the kosher procedures, and only to satisfy the local religious communities. Estonia, which is prohibit the whole thing, he has a law who says the local rabbi will give 20 days notice to the government in order to provide them with a kosher meat. So in other words, although the EU regulation is giving these relaxations, you will not find anywhere that it gives the permission to export meat for trade reasons.
So we're talking now about the fact that the Parliament discussed this, but I think a lot of people in Cyprus, because there was a lot on social media about this, are relieved that they have postponed the vote. But you said they've postponed it for 1 week. Now, it's Orthodox Easter week this week, so one would imagine that the local producers, particularly of sheep and goats, will be selling as usual the meat that they do. I have to ask you this. If you go into local supermarkets, a lot of the meat that is on offer there is imported from Greece. Now, if we have a problem with our farmers finding a market for their products, why on earth are we importing from another country?
Rosie, you will find the answer, you know from whom, which is already contacting me, and we are in constant communication, is the president of the butchers, Mr. Kostas Vatigiotis, which he already said the truth, the whole truth in many TVs, and he said this: we don't have a problem in the local market. Last year, they imported about 100 kilos of meat from Greece.
100,000, I think you mean.
100,000 from Greece. So Mr. Levadiotis is going around and is telling the truth that the Cyprus market has no problem. If there are one or two which they might have an exit number of goods or lamb, then they can try and help them. But I think to use the word cock-up, this is what is going on now, because somebody started this situation, and to be honest, you know that the parties, which I spoke to all party leaders for 48 hours, I haven't even slept, and I was trying to explain to them. And you know that the postpone is about what? The party said, the leaders, that they just want the deadline to be removed and this procedure, this law, to be stay there for infinite time. This is what they discuss. Not about the method, not about if the animals are suffering or not. They want to pressurize the Minister of Agriculture to lift that day and this proposal to stay for infinite period.
So let's be very clear here, please, Kyriakos. Are you saying that all the parliamentary parties, and this is the reason for the postponement, are going to spend the next 7 days pressurising the minister to say that this form of slaughter should be okay for export forever?
Well, as I said, Animal Party Cyprus said many times that we don't actually say which method is good or bad. Either is the so-called proper, or the kosher, or the halal. For us, animals are suffering with either way or not. The fact that this postponed for 1 week is to discuss or pressurize the minister is giving us also time to exercise a maximum pressure to all political party leaders. And to be honest, there are some parties which are against it. They give me indications: Αλληλεγγύη, EDEC, the Socialist, the Greens, Elam, Lilikas, his party. But as you can see,
Kyriakos, those are all the small parties. What is the division in Parliament as to whether or not the big parties are going to play ball or not?
Akel party, although I spoke with the General Secretary, he was very sympathetic to my position and proposals, but of course he didn't give me an indication that is yes or no, but he said they will discuss this in their political bureau and their special team which they set up for this reason. Now, Digo party have informed that they were ready to vote for the motion, for the bill, but today, with this turn around the whole thing, for 1 week, I spoke to in Brussels with the MEP Anya Hazegat, which was in Cyprus. As you know, we invite her when we had our general conference. And of course they are against it, but we have to say that EU regulation 109/2009, it gives these relaxations, but somewhere out there they don't want to hear that these relaxations is to do with the religion teams in each member state, and they have to use it as such.
So it's not for export. This is the important thing, isn't it? The argument originally was it was for export.
Yeah. Someone, and they said, but it's not mentioned in the regulation, not export. Other countries are exporting them. Okay, what about Holland then? Why do they prohibit the export? It's not a market, to be honest. There is no market. And I will explain why all this is just, sorry to say, a joke. If they want to set up a system, a slaughterhouse in Cyprus, do you know that they need maybe 3 to 4 months or 5 months? Then they have to take permission from the veterinary department of Israel. Then they have to come, the rabbis, and check this. Then they have to train people. Then they have all the relevant tools, and they have to be checked by EU. And by that time, probably coronavirus will not be here. And what is now we said on the roof is they try thinking those businessmen which is behind it that there is a market in Israel and to export this meat. Yeah, as I said, I don't want to enter into this issue as a religion issue. For us, it's an issue concerning the welfare of animals and the way animals are treated either in the slaughterhouse with any kind of methods. We are against of any kind of slaughtering of animals as long as they are suffering. Either is less or more. For us, it is something which is unacceptable, and we don't agree with any kind of method. Because I will explain you something which is going on in the last months. We all receive complaints about the slaughtering and the trade of dogs in China and Japan or something.
Yes.
And when I put side by side a dog and a pig, and I said to them, you are complaining about the dog, but the pigs, they got the same treatment in our society. So what's the difference between this and that? Someone might say, yes, but the dog is the best friend of a human being, and it's been brought up as a pet. Well, who said a pig cannot be a pet?
But a lot of people have pigs as pets. So let's move this on to the end, Kyriakos. The point is, the vote has been postponed. What do you do now between now and next week when they will vote again? Because there does seem, from what I've seen on social media, to be a lot of support for your position that there is a certain accepted protocol, if you like, that if you are going to slaughter animals, they should not suffer. And that's the bottom line, isn't it?
Yeah, but the regulation, it does say us very clear that they will not allow animals to be slaughtered without pre-stunning. It's clear. And Temple Grandeur, if you hear about her, she's the first one who designed this special path to take cows into the slaughterhouse. Even they mention Mozart music. Maybe someone is laughing, but she's the one who designed this path, which there won't be sudden moves, there won't be any sudden lights, and to take the cow to the slaughtering procedure. But on the other hand, also scientists, they discover that animals which are to be taken to slaughterhouses, they know this, they get fear, and they create toxins, which toxins are transferred to us when we consume them. So whatever the method is, for us is a no. So from now, if I have to ask you a question, for the next 7 days, APC will continue the pressure. The Minister of Agriculture, he spoke to me 2 hours ago that they are thinking how to help the farmers, which means that maybe, although it's not in my place to propose anything as APC, but I gave them this, let's say, proposal. If the trade, the people which they offer €2.20, €2.40 per kilo to the farmers, and they wanted €2.83. I said to all party leaders, is this 40 cents a reason to go back and amend a law temporarily, and in December we go back as if nothing happens, and to put probably 10,000 goats and sheep in suffering? Why not the government is not subsidize that, give them what they want, and give the meat to the people which now they don't have work, they don't have money, they can give meat to hospitals, to National Guard, and to the weak ones. And this is something which the government or the ruling party or whoever is going to propose that, to show that here we are, we're going to do it in a different way, and we're talking about the so-called normal way.
So we're talking about the possibility of suggesting to the powers that be that a 20 or even 40 cents per kilo compensation from the government would allow slaughtering to continue with pre-stunning as it is at the moment the law, and it would also mean that possibly farmers' livelihoods would be protected, and as you say, any extra meat, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of it, could be given to needy people.
Rosie, this was an idea. At the same time, I said to the party leaders that if the government is coming with such proposal as a measure because of the coronavirus, I said, what about if some other business people, which already they imported goods, some of them are destroyed. Some of them, for example, they import a lot of items for Easter, like chocolates or cheese or whatever. These people now, if they go ahead, the government, they have the right to come and say, hey, you help the farmers. What about me? I have 500,000 damage of my goods, which I brought them to Cyprus, and because of this. We are opening Pandora's box, if you ask me.
Let's hope instead of that it's a happy Easter for all of us, and I wish you the very best of luck with your continued campaign to prevent Cyprus allowing goats and sheep to be slaughtered without anaesthesia or stunning beforehand, and we'll watch the progress very carefully. Thank you for joining me. Happy Easter. And that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. As it's Holy Week here in Cyprus, let me wish you a very happy Easter, or Kalon Pascha. Hope you'll join me for the next edition. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.